Okay, so as you are getting your notes out so that you have your, I think it's the second, no, we're still on the first page. This is European history for Tuesday, the 14th of September, 2021. You've just gotten work back. A couple of you have gotten notices that as of this moment you are not passing. I highlighted in those notices what you can do to fix that problem. In some cases, you owe work that has just not been done. In other cases, you can improve things like your quiz and your quiz grades, your exam grades. If you're not sure what to do, come by and talk to me at a time of mutual convenience. I'll be on lunch duty today outside if you want. And in general terms, fix it. You should all glance at your grades online because as of now, they are an ongoing thing. And this way you can keep control of your own situation, your own self. You make sure you got something to write on, something to write with. Okay. I probably hit this yesterday, but I want to make sure that you understand. One of the motive forces in human society is self-interest. Enlightened self-interest is one of those things that is behind both the free market and our free republic. We can trust people, usually, to follow their self-interest, to pursue goals that will suit them and improve their circumstances. That's good, because enlightened self-interest has led us to the most productive economy in human history. Not that we have it right now, but the United States has been, and the free market has been. Even communists don't argue that their system produces a good living standard. Communists argue for equity, which usually means an equality of misery, where everyone except for the party elite live like peasants. The free market has sparked what the historian Skousen once said is the 5,000-year leap. And not just the free market, the free citizen of a functioning modern republic. If you look at the time of the foundation of the country in the 1780s, you will see a society that is very advanced but agrarian. The average life expectancy was still somewhere in the high 20s to low 30s. Our president had wooden teeth because his teeth had fallen out. That's what they had. No doubt a French monarch would have ivory teeth, but it's not a society that Jesus or Caesar would have been confused by. The societies of the late French monarchs and of the American Revolution are societies much more similar to Rome than to us. Here's another example. My wife was born to World War II generation parents. They had her late. So my wife's grandmother, who I knew, was born in the late 1800s. She grew up in Brewer, Maine, in a small mill town in Maine, around the turn of the 20th century. Her childhood did not have power, running water, or any of the things that we assume are part of normal modern American life. Her lifestyle saw the arrival of the automobile into everyday life and Americans walking on the moon several times between 1969 and 1972. She saw with her own eyes the development of flight, of electrical power, of plumbing for everyday people, of radio, the expansion of newspapers, the printing of magazines, She saw the First and Second World Wars. Her husband fought in the First World War. Her sons in the Second. When she was an old lady, she had seen the birth of the Internet. She lived for almost 100 years. This radical change in just the last 100 years is an indication of how enlightened self-interest serves us. No, it's not a utopian system. No, it doesn't promise to eliminate poverty. No, it doesn't promise to build a crystalline, perfected world order. It simply works by allowing people who are creative to develop their ideas for profit. It unlocks the ideas of everyone in the society. Not simply those well-connected. Not simply those from the elite. Anyone who wants to get rich can try developing a little plastic thingy to go on the end of your shoelaces so that they fit through the eye holes nicely and neatly. Show your notes. I mean the notepad as well. The enlightened self-interest of Crusaders affects our history. How? I talked about this with you yesterday. This should not be a mystery. I'm going to get the Dyson Roll. The question is, which any of you may be urged to answer, or forced to answer, in what way does the enlightened self-interest of returning Crusader knights shape the history of Europe and the world? You are number one. We're going to go counterclockwise. We'll go back there, and you will be somewhere around number 20, I guess. Number 2. Ms. Larson?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm learning.
Well, it encourages them to go out, and it's a way to advance society. It's a way to get more materials for it, like the silks and the.
Oh, go on.
Like getting silks and spices, it helps to grow in that fashion and get materials that otherwise were not available in society.
Right. I don't know if you have ever worn rough cloth close to your skin. I have. And I can tell you, it's unpleasant. Chafing doesn't begin to describe the abrasion that can happen to human flesh when in contact with fabric as rough as linen. And that is what many medieval folk wore. Linen, rough wool, up against their flesh. The idea of replacing that with cotton or silk, it just feels so much better. Is it worth money? Well, if you have money, yeah. Eating food that has flavor and variety. You try subsisting on rice and beans. You can do it. Rice and beans has everything that a person needs to live, or most everything. You can supplement it here and there with little bits of this and that. But you won't enjoy it after a while because your palate will deaden in boredom. Having spiced food, is it worth some money if you have money? Yeah. Spices also include some of the medicines that Arabs use. And our medicine descends from Arab medicine. So, is it worth it when you're ailing or wounded to have access to doctors who do something other than slice your veins open, stick leeches on it, and suck out the evil humors? If you have money, yes it is. So now there is a vacuum. That vacuum is the demand of wealthy people who have experienced a better life for those things that make a better life. The demand of the upper class Europeans for silks and spices. And that demand will draw silks and spices from the farthest corners of Eurasia, from China, across Central Asia, through the Silk Road, from the East Indies, across the Bay of Bengal to India, across the Arabian Sea, up the Persian Gulf or the Red Sea to Damascus and Cairo, and then on Venetian and Genovese trading ships across the Mediterranean, and then from Venice and Genoa across the Alps to Northern Europe. The demand and the willingness to pay the price for silks and spices creates the first long-distance trading network since the fall of Rome, involving Western Europe. This demand is so strong that it becomes everyone's business when they realize that they are getting cheated by the Arabs. Let's say we have a bolt of silk. And that bolt of silk, near the juniper trees with the silkworms in China, might cost, I'm picking a number completely out of the air, 5 pieces of gold. Now, to ship that silk across Central Asia and pay off all the bandits and all the chieftains that exist in Central Asia along the Silk Road, that 5 gold piece bolt of silk, just by crossing Asia, is now worth 15 or 20 gold pieces when it reaches Damascus or Cairo. Now, those merchants in Damascus and Cairo are going to discriminate as they sell. They're going to make choices. Abdul, I know you. You and I are the same kind of Muslim. We are both Sunni Muslims. We are neighbors. We go to the same mosque. I get, at cost, 20 gold piece silk bolt. I sell it to you for 25 gold pieces because we are friends, because we are neighbors. So the price has gone up 5-fold by the time it reaches the Middle East, from China to the markets of Cairo and Damascus. Hakim, you are a benighted Shiite Muslim. And you are from West Africa. What you're doing here, maybe you're touring, maybe you're on Hajj. You're a Muslim, fellow member of the Islamic faith. But you are not a part of my sect of Islam, nor are you a neighbor of mine. So you will pay 35 gold pieces for this bolt of silver, because I want to make a profit. And I deserve to, because I work hard. Antonio, you Christian dog, good to see you again. How's Venice? Has it sunk yet? Now, Antonio, you know that I get the silk at about 20 gold pieces a bolt. You know that I charge fellow members of my faith a reasonable profit. But you also know that because you are a Christian dog from Europe, you will get that same bolt of silver for 50 gold pieces. You can call it the Christian tax, but every single merchant in Cairo and Damascus who was selling to Christian merchants from northern Italy would jack the price up massively. So, the price goes up 4-fold for the merchants who buy the stuff, between 5- and 6-fold for the Muslims who buy from those merchants, and 10-fold, 10 times the original price for Christians. And that's just to get it to Europe. To get it across the Mediterranean Sea and up, these people in Northern Europe, for that same bolt of silk, might be paying 60, 70, 75 gold pieces. That's the price of trade. But they're willing to pay it, because where else are they going to get it? This is going to stimulate all sorts of cross-cultural contacts. Thank you for shifting the camera. This is going to This is going to cause people to start interacting from Italy and from the Middle East. It has already caused some cross-cultural contact across Central Asia. It is going to make the world a smaller place, a more cosmopolitan place, a more sophisticated place, a less culturally isolated place. Long-distance trade is also going to enrich a lot of people, which will stimulate the economy. And finally, Christians who are angry about getting their prices jacked up just because they are Christians and Europeans are going to be mightily motivated to find a way around this Islamic bottleneck. And eventually, that will lead to great things. The Age of Discovery. So, the enlightened self-interest of Crusaders is going to change the world. Now, before we're done with the Middle Age, or the High Middle Ages, and going into the Late Middle Ages, understand that sometimes the world is changed by brilliant people with new inventions and new ideas. And sometimes the world is changed by a guy who has a vision. The sky god Tengri, the god of storms, has spoken to Temujin of the minor tribe known as the Mongols, a tribe that is beaten up by the Tatars, a tribe that is fighting, like all tribes north of China, in the Mongolian steppe, just to survive. Winters, hot and humid and buggy. I'm done. Say that again. What's wrong with that? What I just said? Anyone listening? What did I just say that was wrong?
Buggy.
Buggy. What season did I say?
Hot and humid.
Yes. What season did I say?
Winter.
Summer.
I said winter.
Oh.
Yes. I'm glad somebody was listening closely. I know it's easy to just let me drone on and on and on. My advice is don't. Summers, hot, humid, buggy. Winters, colder than central Canada. That's Mongolia. Everything depends on these shaggy steppe ponies that the Mongolians use for horses. But Temujin, this bastard son of the Mongol warrior clan, illegitimate I mean, is possessed of a vision that says, unite the 8 corners of the world under one yurt. Unite the 8 corners of the world under one tent. Create, in other words, an empire of mankind. Create, in other words, a universal human empire. So, the great Genghis Khan unifies the tribes under the Mongols, and then takes the unified tribes of Mongolia, including Tatars and others, and smashes through into the northern Sung dynasty of China and the southern Sung dynasty of China. And by the time Genghis Khan is dying, China has come under the rule of the Khans. The central empire of mankind, the Middle Kingdom, is now in Mongol hands. How? The Mongols learn to ride before they learn to walk. They tend to be bandy-legged because their knees form around the flanks of horses. Their food is horse flesh. Their drink is fermented mare's milk. They live in yurts, which are a mixture of sheep's wool and horsehair. The Mongols come from one of the most difficult to survive in environments on the earth. I tried briefly describing that when talking about the winter and summer weather in Mongolia. And they are people of war and people of the horse. Now, does anyone recall what Genghis Khan says to his followers after he has conquered China? He has a message for his warriors. I may have mentioned it at the very end of last year's course to somebody. Okay.
There's a head
There is? Ah, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
there. He told them not to live in the cities.
Yes. Alexandra, why? Why not live in the cities? Do you remember, or can you figure it out?
Yes, because if they accommodated to the luxuries of the cities, they wouldn't be tough anymore and they'd just be conquered.
Right. Mongols don't like cities. They turn men into girly men. They turn women into God knows what. He says to his warriors, there was no question of gender in the Mongols. Men, women, and will men. Women who wanted to live like men, so they gave up their femininity, and they basically lived their lives as small, weak men, but they got to live like men. I don't know if there was a male equivalent. I don't think there was. I think they would have just been killed. But I'm not joking. That's what they would do. But in the case of the cities, Alexander is absolutely correct. In order to avoid the feminization or demasculinization of the Mongol warrior, you will, Genghis Khan says, live in your camps outside of their cities. If you want something from the city, don't go into trade. Don't pay the gold price. Pay the iron price. Go in and take it. You want women? Take them. You want booty? Take it. Booty being treasure. It meant something different back then. And the idea is, but that's what I said before when I said women. Do not get seduced by the soft silks of China. But Genghis died. Now, in the time of his sons and grandsons, the great Mongol Empire stretches all the way across the northern Eurasian continent. Everything north of the Himalayas, north of the jungles of Vietnam, everything north of Iran and Afghanistan, all the way through Russia to Poland, and the Mongols actually win a battle against the Holy Roman Empire's forces at the Battle of the Sejo River, close to Vienna, the geographical heart of Europe. Yeah.
Is Sejo in China?
No. The Sejo River is in Hungary. It's a tributary, I think, of the Theiss, which is a tributary, or Tisza, which is a tributary of the Danube. So the Mongols not only conquered China, but they conquer Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and they are threatened to conquer Central Europe. Now, they are terrifying in war. When the Mongols approach a city with closed gates that do not open, the Mongols will then, and I'm talking a few scouts show up, if the doors don't open to the scouts, the Mongols will take the city, overcome its defenses, break through its walls, or go over them usually, and they will take the city. They will take 20 or 30 captives, strap them to trees nearby or poles, and force them to watch what they will do to their homes. The Mongols will then rape everything that's female and maybe a few things that aren't. They will steal, they will burn, and they will murder every man except for the ones they want for slaves, every woman except for the ones they want for slaves, and every child except for the ones they want for slaves. And they will destroy the city. They're not interested in conquering cities. Outside of China, they destroy cities. They want to return to a pastoral life. The people who watch over a week's time their city being destroyed, their homes, their families, they're usually insane by the time this is finished. The Mongols then let them go and drive them westward ahead of the armies. These insane witnesses tell what happened to those people who resisted the Mongols. Sometimes, when Mongol scouts arrive, the city surrenders to them, opening their gates and surrendering to the scouts. Now, there's no guarantee the Mongols won't come in and sack the place, but they have at least a chance that the Mongols might spare them to some extent, might allow their city to continue existing to some extent, because they threw themselves on the mercy of the Mongols immediately. The Mongols tend to travel across the countryside in a vast crescent formation. By the time you see the Mongols in front of you and decide to try to retreat, the wings of the crescent are probably already past you. And if you try to escape and they close in on you, you're already surrounded. They have massive numbers. Each of them is incredibly physically tough. Their steppe ponies may be small and shaggy, not beautiful like the Arabian horses and the Proto-Clydesdales that they face in the Middle East and in Europe, but they can just keep going. They don't require the kind of tender treatment that our horses today demand. They're steppe ponies. They're tough. So the Mongols conquer a vast area. And what they do when they've conquered actually also helps spark the modern era. Does anyone remember the Venetian family that goes east under Mongol protection all the way to Kitai, or China? One of the family actually befriends the grandson of Genghis Khan, who is the emperor of China, Kublai Khan, who lives in his pleasure dome at Xanadu. He is there when Japan is invaded by the Mongols, which fails, thanks to the gods. The divine wind, the kamikaze. Typhoons destroy not one but two Mongol invasion fleets, years apart. What is the name of the family, or the most famous member of the family who wrote a book upon his return to Venice? I'll give you a hint. Oh. Marco! Thank you. It's a pool game when you're swimming. Okay.
Or a grocery store game.
Why would you say
Really?
around a grocery store blind?
Because me and my friends go and we hide in the aisles and say, Marco!
Jackson.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Because she's odd.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
Thank you.
It's funny to listen to hear everybody else go.
Miss Shepard, you are quite right. I know you knew it too. Marco Polo is able to do something that most people throughout history can't do easily, which is cross the Central Asian landmass without being molested or killed. Because the Mongols, once they control an area, are going to keep it peaceful. The only person that's going to do violence in the Mongol Empire are Mongols. If you try doing violence against their will, they'll do violence upon you in such a way that you are an example of what happens to anyone who messes with the Mongol peace. This has an effect on Europe. Eastern Europe is going to be shaped by the nation of Muscovy, which becomes Russia. Just drop the pass on my desk, please. Russia, to this day, is shockingly brutal by Western standards. Did he just assume something about Russia? Yeah. I wrote my senior thesis in college on the Russian Civil War and Russian history. I'm telling you, the Russians admire brutality, they consider it strength, and this is because for over 200 years, Russia was completely under the rule of the Tatars, of the Mongols. These Mongols had no Christian sensibilities about the value of human life. These Mongols had no restraint, no sense of decorum. They ruled by force and terror. Russia, to this day, is stamped with that East Asian taint of cruel brutality and naked force. In the West, for example, we learn to control ourselves through guilt. Mom probably is really good at wielding guilt. You don't want to do something wrong or you feel guilty about it. Guilt is an internal motive. You didn't live up to your own expectations, your family's expectations. You feel bad for yourself. You've let yourself down. The Mongols employ what is common in China, Japan, and elsewhere. Not guilt, but shame. Shame! I'm joking. Nothing to do with you. Shame is public, not private. It is outward, not inward. Now, the West adopts shame after a while. If you are familiar with the stocks in a pilgrim village or a Puritan village, they are two wooden blocks with holes for the head and the hands, and the criminal kneels there and is locked in for a few days, and it's stinky, and everyone throws fruit at him or kicks him. That's public shaming. That's not too typical of Western justice, but shaming is typical of societies in the East, and it is typical of the way the Russians do business. This is the influence of the Mongols. The Mongols eventually break up their empire, and even in China are overthrown by Han Chinese of the Ming Dynasty. In Russia, the Duchy of Muscovy takes over from the Tatars, and the world slowly breaks out of this Mongol freeze. The Mongols also critically damage Islamic civilization, and this is something not fully appreciated in the West. In addition to driving into the heart of Europe, the Mongols also drive into Iran and Iraq, and they take both Iran and part of Iraq. When they take part of Iraq, or the area of the Zagros Mountains between Iran and Iraq, they take a mountain called Alamut. They take that mountain, which is the headquarters of the Hashishan. The Hashishan are a group of Islamic assassins who are shown paradise before they go out on their missions. The paradise of smoking the hash pipe, the paradise of sex, paradise of every kind of pleasure. They are given one night in paradise, like an ancient mystery cult. So the Hashishan are ready to go out into the world and die, killing their targets. The game Assassin's Creed is oh so loosely based on this. The grandfather, Ibn al-Sabah, the grandfather on the mountain, is the head of the Hashishan. For many hundreds of years, the Muslims have tried to get rid of these guys, but nobody can. The Mongols get rid of them in 5 years because they are not willing to put up with assassins in their midst. When the Mongols come into the Middle East, they destroy cities. In effect, the Islamic attack into the Middle East is like hitting somebody in the head with an ice pick. What you're doing is traumatic head injury. Because nerves don't regenerate, at least certain nerves. You do traumatic injury to someone, you're going to permanently damage their ability to think. The Islamic world had been, before the Mongols, the heart of world culture, the highest of human civilizations. Not anymore. From the time of the Mongol attacks on Islam, which also aid and abet the Crusades, the Islamic world loses its edge. And later, when it rebuilds its cities, it loses its edge further because of a fundamentalism that says that new ideas are intrinsically dangerous and potentially satanic. So the kind of effervescent creativity that a society needs in order to be progressing towards a higher standard of living simply isn't there. This intellectual damage is still evident in the Islamic world today. A combination of a trauma done by Mongols and self-inflicted harm done by fundamentalists who refuse to allow people to explore new ideas without being punished. The last thing I'm going to cover regarding medieval life is about the cities, the universities, and the cathedrals that Europeans themselves built. But before I do that, are there any questions, comments, or thoughts regarding the Mongols or anything I've said so far? Why are cities important? to European Western civilization? Why is it important that the cities are built during the High Middle Ages? For what reason does it matter that cities are built? We've talked about this. I don't see any hands. So the question is, why does it matter to Western civilization that in the High Middle Ages, cities like Paris, Frankfurt, and London become real cities, big enough to survive only if trade and money work? You were number one before. Oh, Jackson.
They're cultural and economic hubs, and without them, we wouldn't have pretty much any of the modern stuff we have today. They allowed expansion of pretty much every industrial. It also set the infrastructure for large populations.
Good answer.
But yeah,
Without cities, you have no civilization. In the Dark Ages, Europe had been an echo of Rome. Only when they build their own cities does Europe become a real civilization, having specialized workers, writing, complex institutions, and high technology. Only by having cities do the Europeans have to confront daily the challenges of having large numbers of people living side by side. How do you keep them from killing one another? You develop manners, customs, ways of handling stress. How do you keep them from dying of disease? You bring fresh water in and you take filth away, somehow, in some way. Only by having cities can you have the kind of sparking creativity that is going to make modern times what it is. Cities are a basic requirement of that. Otherwise, you're too busy doing everything you need to do to survive. Cities have specialists who can focus on just one thing. They become good enough at it to become paid. I can tell you all the livelong day about fighting. Until you're in a fight where you could die or get really hurt, you don't know. There's no way you can experience it. Without getting too... I could tell you about the way men and women relate. I won't. But no matter who tells you about it, until you experience it yourself, you don't really understand it. I can tell you what it feels like to lose a loved one, or be betrayed by a friend, or fall in love. There are certain things that you can only really understand when you experience them yourself. The limit of history is that it can give you all sorts of information and lessons and cautionary tales, but you won't understand it until you have lived a little bit and experienced a number of things personally. Then things will make more sense because you will understand what you cannot understand unless you've done it yourself. Having cities is necessary because without them, you're pantomiming civilization. With them, you are living in a civilized way, solving the problems, being civilized. I hope that makes sense. I have a feeling I made a hash of the explanation. If you don't understand what I mean, ask. Okay, I see no questions. Cathedrals. The Gothic cathedral is the apotheosis of Western medieval architecture. The Gothic cathedral operates along a different set of aesthetics. Previously, churches had been Romanesque. Big, heavy roofs, big, thick walls, and basically from the top, this shape, this is a basilica, and you'd have the throne if it's a king's house, or the cross and the altar if this is God's house. And you've got thick walls, little tiny windows, a big, heavy Romanesque church. The walls support the roofs. Yes?
What did the not knowing things until you experience them have to do with cities?
Well, in the Dark Ages, the West was not a civilization actually because it didn't have its own cities. It had towns. It had the memory of Rome. It had the potential to build its own cities. But it was basically going through the motion of being civilized because it didn't have cities. Only when it gets its own cities does it become genuinely civilization again. Because in the act of supporting and maintaining and administrating cities, they develop a quickening of their thought, a more complex organization to their structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem with a great big building is always the roof, how you're going to support the roof. So here we have what is going to be the roof of a Gothic cathedral. Do any of you recall how the roof is supported? Sam?
I do not remember the name, but there are these structures that are on the side that go up and support the.
These structures
Yeah, that.
are called flying buttresses.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what they are thin columns that connect to pillars that are away from the building. The structure is supported by the flying buttresses, which are connected to the pillars. The weight goes down. But these pillars are spaced widely. So if you have the pillars supporting the weight, what are the walls going to do besides keep the heat in and keep the mosquitoes out? Aha! Gothic cathedral architects design walls that are largely made of glass. Not entirely, but largely. You have these huge windows because the wall must support only its own weight, not the weight of the roof above it. So instead of having thick walls with small windows, the windows open up and the walls become more gossamer thin, more like a spider web than a tree trunk. Now, what do the medieval Europeans do with these windows to make them more interesting?
They stain the glass.
They stain the glass. Alexandra, is it just that they color the glass, or do they do something with the colors?
They make pictures from the Bible.
Right. The comic book industry owes its style to the stained glass windows of the Middle Ages. Bright colors, strong, bold lines. So we have images of the saints, images of the book of Genesis, images of moments in Jesus' life. For a society largely illiterate, can't read, can't write, light itself fills the room inside a cathedral in a way that is impossible to describe unless you've experienced it yourself. You don't understand just how beautiful it is to go into a cathedral or a church with beautiful stained glass windows with the lights off in the daytime, so that the natural light coming through the stained glass is what lights the space. Nothing like it. Absolutely wonderful experience. You should do it. You really should. You owe it to yourself. Nobody had built anything like this before. The Greeks, the Romans, the Muslims, the Chinese, the Indians. Nobody. This is quintessentially of Christian Western civilization. I'm going to leave it there. The next time we're going to do universities, and we're going to go into the late Middle Ages and move towards even closer towards Renaissance. Questions, comments, thoughts? Haley?
Why are we on the right side of the board and not the left?
Because I changed things up.
Why? I've never been on the left side of the board.
Well, keep right. I say that as a conservative. Keep right. Yes.
Are traditional Catholic churches still built like that?
Yes. Look, a lot of Catholic churches after the Vatican Council II of the 1960s build in a new aesthetic style that's much more like a temple than a cathedral.
Gotcha.
But Catholic churches up until the 1960s were built like that, and there are a few that still use that aesthetic today. I love them. They're beautiful.
Yeah, I do.
Any other questions, comments, or thoughts? Oh, yes. Shh, Roberta.
I just wanted to tell you that I've been to Sagrada de Familia in Spain,
Oh, wow.
and that's a huge church with the windows, and the sun was setting so good.
Oh my gosh, that must have been incredible. La Sagrada Familia is in Catalonia. It's in Barcelona. And it is a cathedral built between the 1920s and the 2010s. It is a modern cathedral. It was started before the Spanish Civil War by Antonio Gaudí, an architect who worked in almost organic forms. Nobody did things like Gaudí. And then the Spanish Civil War and the Franco period stopped construction, but in the 1980s they resumed construction. And so you have this mixture of very modern styles and Gaudí styles. And it's like no other church in the world. You saw it? Wonderful. Wonderful. Anyway, thank you for your attention. If you want to grab your gear and return to your seats, you may. You can certainly talk quietly amongst yourselves. Thank you.